The police had to take my brother away. My 10-year-old son is in handcuffs because of a bogus claim. My parents stood by and did nothing. What I did next ruined all of their jobs. Okay. Reddit. My brother called the police on my 10-year-old son and said he stole a Rolex worth $15,000. My parents agreed with him. While I was at the hospital saving someone's life, the police hauled my child away in handcuffs. I made sure everyone who was involved paid for what they did when I found out what really transpired. This is the complete story. I'm a 40-year-old man named Carter who works as a cardiologist at a big hospital in California. He had a good career, a nice house in the suburbs, a wife named Rachel, and 2 kids. Dylan was 10 years old, and Sophie was 6. Our lives are pretty tranquil. I work long hours at the hospital and then come home and help with schoolwork. Family time is on the weekends. Nothing flashy, just a solid middle-class life where I do what I love and make a nice living doing it. It wasn't simple to become a cardiologist. 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency in internal medicine, and 3 more years of fellowship in cardiology. I was 32 years old, had a lot of college debt, and was just starting to create my career when I finished my training. But I enjoyed the work, the accuracy it took, the immediate effect it had on patient survival, and the satisfaction of mending something as complicated as the heart. At 40, I've been a cardiologist for 8 years. I do interventional procedures, which are the kinds of surgeries where you put catheters through arteries, play stances, and sometimes even bust up a chest when things go terribly bad. It's a lot of strain, and you need to be able to think clearly and keep your hands steady. You have to make the right choice at the appropriate time for people's lives. You never get used to that duty, but you learn to carry it. My hospital compensation is good, about $380,000 a year, with extra for being on call and doing emergency surgeries. Rachel and I bought our house 5 years ago. It's a 4-bedroom home in a quiet community with decent schools. Not fancy, but cozy. We don't like to show off. Rachel is a part-time school nurse. She does it largely because she likes having her own job and helping out, not because we need the money. We live below our means, save, and invest. We both care about having stable finances. Not everyone is cut out for the medical sector. The hours are terrible. The stress never goes away. And you really are in charge of people's life. But healing a broken heart and bringing someone home to their family when they were about to die is really fulfilling. That feeling of fulfillment is what gets me through the 60-hour weeks and the 3 a.m. emergency calls. My parents live in a beautiful Spanish-style house that they bought in the 1990s, around 20 meters away. The property is around half an acre, and the huge rear is like a park. They have a patio with a barbecue built in, a fire pit, and even a small vegetable garden that my mom takes care of all the time. The backyard was always the best place for family get-togethers. There was a lot of room for youngsters to run about outside while adults talked inside. I thought family was important back then, so we still saw them most weekends. It was a tradition to have lunch on Sundays. My mom would make these big meals. If the weather was nice, my dad would grill, and we would all sit around their dining table like a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting. Dylan adored going there. We'll ask all week when we will go see Grandma and Grandpa again. Sophie was usually quieter and more hesitant about it. I thought that was just how she was. She is naturally shy. That's what I thought. My dad is no longer working. He worked as an electrical engineer for 35 years before quitting 5 years ago. He has a solid job, a good retirement plan, and owns his own house. He's a practical person. He fixes things on his own. Has thoughts on sports and politics. A pretty typical boomer dad. When Blake and I were kids, my mom stayed home with us. Later, she went back to work part-time as an administrator at a community college. 3 years ago, she retired. Now she spends her time gardening, going to book club, and getting too engaged in other people's lives. My brother Blake, who is 4 years older than me, is a hotshot lawyer with his own law business. In California's legal circles, Guy's created a name for himself. He knows judges, prosecutors, and half the police department on a first-name basis. He also likes to remind people about it. Blake always had to tell a story about winning a case or meeting someone important at a family dinner. 10 years ago, Blake opened his own clinic. After working at a mid-sized business for 5 years to build his name and client list, he now focuses on criminal defense, mostly white-collar crimes like embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion. These are the kinds of situations where clients can afford to pay high rates. His company grew to roughly 8 people, including 3 other lawyers, 2 paralegals, and support staff. He was making over $500,000 a year, maybe even more. He never disclosed exact numbers, but he loved to drop hints about how well he was doing. He drove a Tesla and wore Rolex watches. Yes, the irony. Lived in a McMansion in a gated community where the HOA fines you if your lawn is more than half an inch long. Nicole, his wife, comes from a wealthy family. Her father owns a group of car dealerships in Southern California. They sent their son Austin to private school, went on European vacations every summer, and lived the life Blake thought showed he had made it. Blake always made sure that everyone knew it. Every time the family got together, it was like his own highlight reel. He told stories about his most recent high-profile case, dropped names of judges he played golf with, and said which prosecutor owed him a favor. My mom loved it and talked about my successful lawyer son to anyone who would listen. My dad was more discreet, but it was evident he was proud of Blake's accomplishments. Blake and I have never been friends. He's always acted like he's better than me, always trying to outdo me or make sly comments about how his profession is better than mine. He would add that it must be wonderful to work for someone else, like when I worked at the hospital, but he would conveniently forget that I'm a specialist making good money while he's drowning in business overhead and client acquisition costs. When are you going to open your own business? He'd wonder if working at a big hospital was somehow settling. Him, Nicole, and Austin are all in the living room. When we stepped in, Blake hardly looked up from his phone. He only nodded at me quickly before going back to reading some critical email. The guy was always on his phone, even on weekends, reading texts like he was in charge of a disaster. Austin was doing what teens do, staring at his device, wearing earbuds, and living in whatever digital realm was more important than spending time with his family. Nicole did, though. In their marriage, she's always been the more friendly one. She hugged Rachel, said kind things about Sophie's clothing, and asked about my job. Just normal light conversation that made the morning seem good. My mom was getting lunch ready in the kitchen, even though we wouldn't eat for hours. She is one of those folks that starts cooking at morning for a 1 p.m. food. Needs everything to be just right. Even though it was too early to start cooking, my dad was outside playing with the grill. This was how they did things. Keep busy, keep moving, and make sure everything is perfect for family get-togethers. The first hour went as usual. Dylan raced directly to the backyard as if he had just been freed from prison. He took the soccer ball out of the garage and started dribbling it about on the grass to start his own game while Grandpa was still working on the grill. I could hear him talking to himself outside, way kids do when they play soccer. Dylan cuts to the left, beats the defender, shoots, and scores. Sophie kept close to Rachel and sat quietly on the couch, coloring in a book she had brought with her. She had a big bag of art supplies, like crayons, markers, coloring books, and sketch paper. She had made her own small universe in a corner of the room as the adults talked around her. That was her safe place, being there but not having to do anything. I talked to my folks about work, the hospital, and other boring grown-up things. Told a couple stories on recent cases. There are no patient details, simply general stories about the difficulties of interventional cardiology. My dad asked inquiries on the technical side because he was really interested in the procedures. My mom largely just listened, but she did say a few times how stressful my job must be. Blake would sometimes talk about his newest case to show how smart and well-connected he was. He was defending a CEO who was accused of stealing money from his own company. Blake said that he was the only one who could save an innocent man from a corrupt justice system. It didn't matter that the evidence seemed quite damning. In Blake's story, he was the hero who outsmarted lethargic prosecutors. My mom listened to everything he said and asked follow-up questions, amazed at how good he was at law. My dad nodded along, looking proud. In the meantime, I'm sitting there thinking about how Blake probably charges $600 an hour to defend folks who stole from their workers. But whatever, it's not my problem. The usual way to get together with family. Everyone is doing what they were told to do. Blake is a successful lawyer. Me, the doctor of the stable. My parents, who are proud grandparents. Rachel, the helpful wife, and the kids being kids. Harmony on the surface hides all the problems and resentments underneath. Then, around 10 a.m., my phone rang. Emergency at the hospital. My co-worker's voice was urgent. The patient had a serious accident and was in severe condition with cardiac trauma. They needed surgery right away or they wouldn't make it through the afternoon. This is what it's like to be a cardiologist. Emergencies don't care if it's Saturday or if you're having lunch with your family. Someone's heart stops working, right? And all of a sudden, your plans for the weekend don't matter. I got up right away. Rachel offered to drive me. She realized that having someone who could really drive would save valuable time in an emergency. I looked in on the kids before we departed. Dylan was having a great time playing in the backyard. Sophie was still on the couch with her book of colors. I spotted my mom in the kitchen and urged her to keep an eye on the kids and feed them when it was time. We would come back as soon as the surgery was over. She said yes right away. Why wouldn't she? These were her grandkids. My folks have seen them countless of times previously without any problems. I had no reason to believe this time would be any different. If I could go back to that time and know what was about to happen, I would have taken both kids to the hospital and had them wait. But you don't know these things. You know your family will only do the bare minimum. Don't hurt your grandkids. It seems that was too much to ask for. It took Rachel and me 20 minutes to get to the hospital. The patient was already ready for surgery, and the situation was worse than what was first thought. Severe chest injuries, damaged ventricles, and internal bleeding that was filling the pericardial cavity. We worked hard for 3 hours in the operating room to stabilize the heart, fix the damage, and get this person's cardiovascular system working again. The operation went well. The patient was stabilized by 1:00 p.m. and was transported to the ICU with a good chance of recovery. I felt that old flush of happiness. A life has been saved. Another family that wouldn't have to prepare a funeral. Rachel and I had a brief lunch at the hospital cafeteria before going back to my parents' place to get the kids. We got there around 2 p.m. I sensed something was very wrong the second I went in. There was no Dylan. There was no more laughing, rushing around, or continual excitement. There was no noise in the living room. Sophie was curled up on the couch, her face pallid and her body smaller than it should have been for her age. My parents were sitting across from her and seemed uneasy. Everyone in Blake's family was present, and they were all quiet. Present was a strange tension in the air that made my stomach plummet. Sophie leaped from the couch and ran up to Rachel as soon as she spotted her. She grabbed Rachel like she was going to drown. And Rachel was a lifeline. Her small shoulders were shaking. Then she glanced up at Rachel and said in a little, fearful voice, "Mom, the police took Dylan away." Time stopped. I couldn't believe what she had just said. Police? Dylan. My 10-year-old kid was supposed to be playing outside. The phrases didn't make sense together, like when someone says, "The sun rose at midnight." I turned back to look at my parents and then Blake. Where is Dylan? What does she mean? The cops took him. Blake slowly got up, looking very calm, which made me angry. He looked me in the eye and said, "Your son stole my Rolex. It's worth about 15 grand. He wouldn't admit it and give it back, so I called the cops." The room tilted. We were rivals since we were kids. Blake was the firstborn, the golden child, and the one who went to the best college and then law school. My parents were happy that I chose medicine, but they never celebrated it the same manner as my older brother. When Blake passed the bar, my parents held a big party and invited half the neighborhood. After I concluded my cardiology fellowship, we enjoyed dinner with the family. That's pretty much how things are going. What really bothered me was how Blake treated Rachel and the kids. He would say things that made Rachel feel bad about working part-time, as if she was wasting her education by not getting a full-time job. Forget that Rachel made a conscious decision to give our family more freedom. Blake didn't get anything that didn't meet his idea of what success was. Maximum income, maximum status, maximum everything. Blake didn't care about Dylan and Sophie at all. He would talk about Austin's private school successes, test scores, and ambitions for Ivy League college in a way that made them look bad. Dylan was a good student at his public school, made friends quickly, and was great in sports. Blake thought that was basic and not very impressive. He couldn't see Sophie since she was so silent. Sometimes he forgot her name and called her the little one when he bothered to say anything to her at all. It's funny that Austin is a good kid, even though Blake is a bad dad. He is quiet and polite, and he seems embarrassed by how much his dad brags. I'd see him play with Dylan and Sophie at family events and be a good older cousin. I would marvel how he turned up okay with Blake as his role model. Nicole might have made it even. Even though she puts up with his antics, she's always been more down to earth than he is. My parents treated Blake and me like the golden kid and the scapegoat. There was nothing wrong with Blake. He missed a family occasion because he was too busy and important. When I missed one because I had to have emergency surgery, they said, "Can't you find someone else to cover?" Blake's luxurious lifestyle was something I wanted to have. My more modest options were too safe. Years ago, I learnt not to get involved with his crap. Give him the chance to shine. His need to feel better than others. I had my job, my family, and my own idea of what success meant that didn't need to be proven all the time. But that relationship, where Blake was always correct and I was supposed to agree with him, led to what transpired. Blake was the boss in his world, and everyone else, including me, did what he said. That meant trusting him more than a 10-year-old. Nicole is his wife. Their son Austin is 15 years old. Blake acts like he's teaching that kid how to be the next Supreme Court justice. It's all about creating the right connections, leaving a legacy, and being successful. My approach with Dylan and Sophie, on the other hand, is easier. Be nice to each other. Put in a lot of effort. Be nice to other people. A very different idea. I get it. For a long time, my relationship with Blake has been rocky. He's the golden child, the lawyer who does well, and my parents talk about him all the time. I'm just a doctor. A good job, nothing fancy, and not worth talking about until someone asks. That situation definitely should have alerted me about what was coming. But you don't expect your own family to act that way. It happened on a Saturday in June 2023, which was about 2 years ago. But those memories still come back to me while I'm trying to sleep. I wake up thinking about how afraid and bewildered my son is at a police station, and the anger comes rushing back. That morning was quite routine. Earlier in the week, we had made plans to visit. My mom called on Tuesday and asked if we might come to lunch on Saturday. She wanted to cook her renowned lasagna. The kids were eager, and Dylan was the most excited. He had been telling everyone all week that he wanted to play soccer with his grandpa in the backyard. Sophie was quieter about it, but that's how she usually was. She liked remaining home and reading and coloring instead than running around. I spent an hour at home on Saturday morning going over patient files and surgery notes. I had a complicated case planned for Monday. A 62-year-old with significant stenosis who needed a valve replacement. I wanted to be ready. The kids watched television as Rachel made breakfast. This calm scene at home that seemed completely normal. There were no clues that our life would fall apart in a few hours. Rachel took us to my parents' place. I'm really bad at driving, and she's gotten used to being my driver when I visit family. It's not that I can't drive, it's that I'm too careful, which is annoying. 15 miles per hour below the speed limit. Too many brakes. Acting like every merge is a military mission. Rachel is patient with it. Takes charge every time we go somewhere together. The kids don't even ask about it anymore. Mom is the one who drives. Dad drives and controls the radio. Dylan was very delighted the whole way there. He bounced in his seat and asked if Grandpa had fixed the soccer goal in the backyard. Dylan was holding my dad to his word to fix the net the previous time we were there. Dylan has always been like that. Full of energy, excited about everything, and trusting that grown-ups will follow their word. That trust was going to be broken in the worst way possible. Sophie sat next to him and looked out the window without saying much. I asked her a few times if she was okay, and she just nodded and said one word. Okay. Yes. Okay. I remember thinking that she might have been fatigued or just wanted to stay home that day. Kids can get cranky when they have to do things for their family. I would have listened to that gut feeling, turned the car around, and kept my kids safe if I had realized what was going to happen. Maybe Sophie knew something I didn't when I look back. Kids sometimes have that gut sensation that something is wrong, even if they can't say why. She had always been more careful around Blake's relatives than Dylan was. Dylan believed in everyone until they gave him a reason not to. Sophie looked first and then made a choice. She would sit silently at family events, observing people talk and reading the atmosphere in a way that most 6-year-olds don't. A few months ago, Blake yelled at Dylan for being too close to his car because he was anxious about fingerprints on the Tesla. Dylan was hurt by the harshness, but he got over it in a few minutes. Sophie, who had been observing from the porch, wouldn't go close Blake for the rest of the visit. She would move her body to keep someone between her and him. Rachel and I realized that she was avoiding us on purpose, but we didn't say anything. It's okay for kids to have favorites among their family. We got there at about 9 o'clock in the morning. Blake's family was already there. I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling over because the anger and confusion hit me so hard that I felt dizzy. Are you out of your mind? You called the cops on my 10-year-old son. Blake replied, as if he were demonstrating simple math. What you do has effects. The police will show him how to act well. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to tell me that this was some kind of twisted joke and that they had surely stepped in and stopped the craziness. But they just sat there, without looking at me or saying anything. My mom looked like she was in pain. My father looked worn out. Neither of them said anything to protect their grandson. Dad, I cried, my voice quivering with barely controlled rage. You let them take Dylan? Your grandson? 10 years old. Finally, my dad spoke. His voice was low. Blake said that Dylan took the watch. We asked Dylan over and over again if he had it. He kept repeating no, but Blake was sure. The police came and brought Dylan to the station to talk to him. To ask questions? I said the words again slowly. You let the cops take my child in for interrogation without calling me beforehand. My mom mentioned every week that you were in surgery. We didn't want to bother you while you were having an emergency procedure. I found the logic so funny that I chuckled. Instead, you let the cops take my kid away and scare my daughter by making her witness it happen. Blake rushed in with that calm, annoying voice again. Dylan continued saying he didn't take the watch, although he did. Kids need to learn that lying has repercussions sometimes. That's when something inside me broke. The protective parent instinct, the anger at this unfairness, and the complete betrayal by my own family all came together to make me very angry. I took out my phone and contacted the police station to ask where my kid was and to talk to the person who was in charge of his case. They said that Dylan was there and being questioned for stealing. I told them I was his dad. I had never been told, and I was on my way right away. Then I turned to Blake and said very clearly, "You just destroyed your own life. I hope that watch was worth it." He actually smirked. "Don't be dramatic. It's just questioning." Rachel and I left immediately, taking Sophie with us. The entire drive to the station, Sophie held Rachel's hand, silent tears running down her face. When I asked her what happened, she said in this small voice, "Dylan didn't take anything. I was with him the whole time. Uncle Blake is lying." At the police station, I found my son sitting in an interrogation room. A 10-year-old child in a room designed to break adult criminals. The room was exactly what you'd picture. Grey walls, metal table bolted to the floor, that two-way mirror everyone knows is there. Dylan looked so small in that chair, dwarfed by the institutional furniture. His eyes red from crying. His whole body language screaming fear and confusion. When he saw me walk in, his face crumpled. He jumped up from the chair and ran over, throwing his arms around me, his little body shaking with sobs he'd been holding in. I could feel how tense he was, wound tight with stress and fear. Kids aren't supposed to feel like this. They should feel safe, protected, and secure. "Please, Dad, I didn't take the watch," he whispered through his tears, his voice muffled on my shirt. I promise I didn't. I told them over and over again, but no one believes me. Dad, Uncle Blake keeps saying I'm lying, but I'm not. I swear I'm not. The desperation in his voice broke my heart. This was a kid who'd never been in trouble, never lied about anything significant, suddenly being treated like a criminal. I held him and felt my heart breaking and my rage building simultaneously. I believe you, buddy. I know you didn't take anything. We're going to fix this. They kept asking me the same questions over and over. Dylan continued, words tumbling out now that he felt safe. Where did you hide the watch? Why did you take it? What did you do with it? I kept saying I didn't take it, but they wouldn't listen. Uncle Blake was there, too, telling them I was lying. Why would he say that? Dad? Why would he lie about me? That's what gutted me most. Dylan couldn't comprehend why an adult he trusted would falsely accuse him. His worldview was simple. Adults told the truth. Adults protected kids, family, especially. Blake had shattered that fundamental trust. The officer handling the case, some guy named Wright, came over with his report. He was maybe early 40s, looked tired, probably nearing end of shift. The boy maintains he didn't take the watch. We've questioned him for about 90 minutes now. Without evidence or an admission, we can't really proceed further. We'll need to wait for the complainant to provide more proof of theft. 90 minutes, I repeated, keeping my voice level despite wanting to scream. You questioned my 10-year-old son for 90 minutes without his parents present, without even calling us first. Wright had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting his weight, not quite meeting my eyes. The complaint came from his uncle, a lawyer with good standing in the community. Blake is well known to the department, has worked with us on numerous cases. The grandparents confirmed they had legal guardianship at the time since you were unreachable during surgery. We followed protocol for questioning a minor in custodial supervision. Protocol? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Did this protocol include checking if the watch was actually missing? Or did you just take my brother's word and drag my child away in handcuffs based on nothing but his accusation? Did you verify that anything was actually stolen before you traumatized a 10-year-old? Wright's expression changed. A flash of something, guilt, maybe, or realization that they'd screwed up. We operate on good faith when complaints come from attorneys and family members. Blake insisted the watch was taken during the visit and that your son was the only person who could have taken it. He was very convincing in his certainty. I'm sure he was. My brother's very good at being convincing. That's literally his job. But being convincing doesn't make him right. I was struggling to keep my voice calm, professional, when what I wanted was to start breaking things. And the handcuffs, was that protocol, too? Wright looked even more uncomfortable. Handcuffs weren't strictly necessary given the child's age and the non-violent nature of the accusation. But Blake, the uncle, insisted on standard arrest procedure, said it was important the boy understand the seriousness of theft charges. That sometimes kids need to experience consequences to learn. That sealed it. Blake hadn't just called the cops. He'd specifically requested they traumatize Dylan, handcuff him, treat him like a dangerous criminal. All to teach him a lesson about a theft that never happened. This wasn't about a missing watch. This was about power, about Blake asserting dominance, about putting my kid in his place. I want to file a formal complaint, I said, my voice cold and precise, against my brother for filing a false report and against whoever authorized questioning a minor for 90 minutes without parental notification. I also need copies of everything. The report, the interrogation notes, recordings if you have them, all of it, every word, every document, every piece of evidence that will show exactly what happened here today. Wright nodded slowly, looking like he realized that this situation was about to become a major problem for everyone involved. I can arrange that, but sir, I have to tell you, your brother has significant connections with the department. Multiple officers here have worked with him professionally. The captain considers him a friend. This could get complicated if you pursue it. Let it get complicated, I said, meeting his eyes directly. I don't care if he's best friends with the police chief and the governor. He traumatized my child over something my child didn't do. That's going to have consequences. And if those consequences make some people uncomfortable, well, they should have thought of that before they handcuffed a 10-year-old based solely on the word of his uncle. Wright nodded again, looking resigned. I'll get you those copies. For what it's worth, your son was consistent in his denials throughout the questioning. Never wavered, never changed his story, didn't show any of the typical behavioral signs of deception. I noted that in my report. Then why keep questioning him for 90 minutes? Because your brother kept insisting we weren't pressing hard enough, that the boy was a skilled liar, that we needed to push harder to get the truth. He was very persistent. Of course he was. Blake probably enjoyed watching Dylan squirm, enjoyed demonstrating his power, enjoyed the whole performance. We got Dylan and Sophie home. Rachel ordered pizza because cooking was the last thing on anyone's mind. Dylan sat on the couch between us, still shaking occasionally, looking smaller than he should. Sophie sat on Rachel's other side, holding her mom's hand. Both kids were traumatized by different aspects of the same nightmare. That night, after the kids were finally asleep, Rachel and I sat in our bedroom and planned our next move. I called a friend from medical school who'd gone into medical malpractice law, asked for a referral to someone who handled false accusations and police misconduct. He gave me a name, Jennifer Walsh, attorney who specialized in exactly this kind of case. Monday morning, I took a personal day and went to see Walsh, brought all the police documents, explained the entire situation, held nothing back about Blake's connections or my parents' complicity. She listened to everything, took notes, and then sat back with this expression I couldn't quite read. "This is bad," she said finally. "But it's also incredibly actionable. Your brother made a fake report to the police. The officer broke the rules by not telling you right away when your young child was arrested. And then there's the matter of the watch itself. Has your brother even shown that it's really gone?" "I don't know," I said. "For all I know, he put it somewhere and forgot where. Or he's lying through his teeth to make a point." Walsh replied that we should start there. "We want proof that the watch was stolen. We want the records and recordings of the interrogation. We write down everything that was done to your son and make a case not just against your brother, but also against the department for how they handled this. Your brother's connections may have helped him get this far, but they won't protect him from recorded wrongdoing." Walsh filed motions and requests during the next week. The cops had to give up all of Dylan's interrogation records. "We have recordings of everything." For 90 minutes, my traumatized youngster insisted he didn't take the watch while Blake and the police tried to get him to admit it. It was one of the hardest things I've ever heard. Hearing Dylan's voice becoming smaller and more scared as the questions went on. The recording also showed Blake telling the police how to question Dylan, what questions to ask, and how to put pressure on him. A lawyer used his understanding of how to question people against his own nephew. Just that recording made me sick. Walsh also got Blake's phone records and financial data through a subpoena. He was looking for confirmation that the watch really existed and was missing. It turned out that Blake had made an insurance claim for the watch 6 months before, saying it was too broken to be fixed. His insurance company had given him $14,000. The watch he said Dylan took either didn't exist anymore or Blake was lying to the police and committing insurance fraud at the same time. As soon as Walsh gave this proof to the district attorney, they started looking into it right away. Blake's link didn't seem to matter as much when he was facing a lot of serious charges. The DA's office appreciated cases involving dishonest lawyers because they got a lot of coverage and helped make the legal profession look better. My parents started phoning while this was going on. First, my mom cried and asked me why I was making things worse. Then my dad used his strong voice to inform me that I was breaking up the family over a misunderstanding. Blake also called and went back and forth between threatening me with legal action and seeming like we might work things out. I blocked everyone. Every number, email address, and every way they might reach me. Rachel did the same thing. We were done being the family members that put up with bad behavior to keep the peace. 3 weeks after the event, my parents came to our house one evening. I could see them through the glass. They brought gift bags, possibly because they thought giving the youngsters gifts would make things better. I didn't even bother to open the door. I yelled through it. Get out of here now or I'll call the police. Carter, please, my mom said back. We need to talk about this like adults. Adults don't let their grandchildren get arrested over lies, I answered. Adults don't side with a liar over the victim. Get off my property. My dad tried next. Son, Blake made a mistake. Can't we move past this? He's your brother. That's what pushed me over the edge. He stopped being my brother when he handcuffed my son. You stopped being my parents when you let it happen. This isn't a mistake. This was a choice. All of you made choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. They left eventually, but not before I called 911 and reported them for trespassing and attempted witness intimidation. The police documented it, added it to the growing case file. Every action they took to try to make this go away just dug their hole deeper. The legal process moved forward. Dylan was examined by a child psychologist who documented the trauma from his interrogation. Anxiety, nightmares, fear of police, trust issues. The report was damning, painting a clear picture of how this incident had damaged a child who'd done nothing wrong. Blake was charged with filing a false police report and attempted insurance fraud. Wright, the officer who'd conducted the interrogation, was charged with violating procedure regarding minors and constitutional rights violations. My parents weren't criminally charged, but I filed for a permanent restraining order against them, citing emotional distress to my children and their role in enabling the false accusation. Blake tried to use his connections to make it all disappear. He called in favors, reached out to colleagues, tried to pressure the DA's office to drop the charges, but the evidence was too solid, the case too public. Local news had picked up the story. Prominent attorney accused of filing false report against nephew. His reputation was crumbling in real time. The trial for Wright came first. With all the evidence Walsh had compiled, it was brutal. The recording of Dylan's interrogation was played in court. The judge and jury heard my 10-year-old son's voice, scared and confused, insisting he didn't take the watch, while Wright and Blake pressed him to confess to something he didn't do. Wright tried to defend himself, claiming he followed protocol and had no reason to doubt Blake's story. But the violations were clear. Failure to immediately notify parents, conducting an extended interrogation of a minor without counsel or parental presence, allowing a civilian, Blake, to coach the interrogation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Wright was sentenced to 3 years in prison, fired from the police force, and permanently barred from law enforcement. He was also ordered to pay Dylan $1.5 million in damages. I watched him cry in court when the sentence was read, his career and life destroyed by his own choices. Blake's trial was next. And if Wright's trial was brutal, Blake's was devastating. The evidence of the insurance claim combined with the false police report painted a picture of a man who'd either committed fraud or falsely accused a child to cover up his own mistake. The recording of him coaching Wright during Dylan's interrogation showed calculated cruelty toward his own nephew. Blake's lawyer tried everything. Character witnesses talking about his community service, his successful law practice, his family. But none of that mattered against the recording of Dylan crying while Blake pressured officers to break him. The jury saw a powerful man using his position and connections to traumatize a child, and they weren't having it. Guilty on both charges. 4 years in prison, $500,000 in damages to Dylan, and permanent disbarment. His law firm shut down within a week of the verdict. All those connections he'd bragged about for years vanished overnight. Turns out, when you're a disbarred attorney facing prison time, your professional network decides they never really knew you that well. I watched Blake break down in court when the disbarment was announced. All those years building his practice, his reputation, his network gone. Nicole sat in the back row looking devastated, probably calculating how to support Austin and herself with Blake in prison and no income. Part of me felt bad for her and Austin. They hadn't done anything wrong, but Blake had made his choices and his family would have to live with the consequences alongside him. My parents weren't criminally prosecuted, but the restraining order was granted. Permanent restriction preventing them from coming within 500 feet of me, Rachel, Dylan, or Sophie. No contact in any form. The judge was clear in his ruling. Their failure to protect their grandson and their subsequent attempts to intimidate us into dropping charges showed they posed a continued threat to my family's well-being. My mom cried in court when the order was read. My dad sat there looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. I felt nothing. Maybe that makes me cold. But they'd chosen Blake over Dylan. They'd watched police take their 10-year-old grandson away and done nothing to stop it. That's not something you forgive just because they regret it now. After the trials, life slowly returned to normal. Dylan had some rough months. Nightmares about police, anxiety when he saw officers in public, trust issues that required working through with a counselor, but kids are resilient. With time and support, he healed. The nightmares faded. His smile came back. He joined his school soccer team and became one of their best players. Sophie came out of her shell more after we cut contact with my parents and Blake. Turns out she'd always felt uncomfortable around them, but couldn't articulate why. Kids sense things sometimes that adults miss. She's 8 now, more confident, actually talks and laughs during family dinners instead of sitting quietly. Removing the toxic family members gave her space to be herself. Rachel held our family together through all of it. She was the steady presence when I was consumed with rage and legal proceedings. She kept Dylan and Sophie's routine stable, made sure they felt safe and loved despite the chaos. I don't know what I did to deserve a partner like her, but I'm grateful every day. 2 years later, we're in a good place. Dylan's 12 now, thriving in school, star player on his soccer team. When I watch him play, I sometimes remember that scared 10-year-old in the police station, and feel grateful he overcame it. Sophie's 8, still quieter than her brother, but genuinely happy. She hasn't mentioned her grandparents once in 2 years, and I don't bring them up. As for my parents and Blake, I've blocked every form of contact. Other family members occasionally reach out, suggesting I should forgive and reconnect. Every time I either hang up or walk away, there's nothing to discuss. Some things can't be forgiven. When you let police handcuff and traumatize your 10-year-old grandson over a lie, you don't get to come back from that. Blake's serving his sentence, and from what I hear through the grapevine, prison hasn't been kind to an ex-lawyer. Wright's in a different facility, probably having an equally rough time as a former cop. Their choices destroyed their lives, and I don't lose sleep over it. My parents tried to show up at Dylan's school once, apparently thinking they could see him during recess. The school had been given copies of the restraining order and called me immediately. I called the police. They showed up and documented the violation. My parents haven't tried again since. Eventually, they'll understand that the relationship is over. They made their choice. They live with it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.